So there's Elder Vrextaco, right? Picture a 7-foot-tall praying mantis wearing what can only be described as the galaxy's most pretentious robes, sitting in his floating chair like he's personally responsible for keeping the universe from falling apart. Which, according to him, he basically is. Counselor Quillnoth, he announces in that voice that sounds like gravel being sorted by a particularly judgmental librarian. It is time once again for the sacred test of the Zephyrian cubs. Now Quillnoth, who looks like someone crossed a penguin with a briefcase and gave it anxiety issues, practically vibrates with excitement. This guy lives for bureaucratic drama. Ah yes, Elder, the test that has broken the spirits of the mightiest warriors, the most brilliant scientists, and the most patient philosophers across 17 systems. And he's not exaggerating. The Zephyrian cubs are basically the galaxy's ultimate childcare nightmare. Imagine ferrets, but they're the size of house cats. They can phase through solid matter when they're excited. They read minds when they're curious, and they have the emotional regulation of caffeinated toddlers. Oh, and they're considered sacred, so you can't exactly put them in cosmic timeout. The tradition goes like this. If your species wants a seat on the Galactic Council, you have to prove you can handle responsibility by successfully caring for these cubs for one standard galactic month. Sounds simple, right? Wrong. The Krellians lasted 6 hours before their champion warrior was found crying in a supply closet. The ethereal collective, who literally exist as pure thought, managed 3 days before declaring the cubs incompatible with enlightenment. So naturally, when Marcus Webb stumbles into this mess, nobody expects anything except premium entertainment. Marcus is what you might charitably call an average human. He's got that slightly rumpled look of a guy who fixed broken air recyclers for a living, and considers a successful day one where nobody yells at him. He'd been trying to find the bathroom on the space station where he was doing some maintenance work, when he took a wrong turn, stepped through what he thought was a door, and ended up in the most ornate room he'd ever seen. "Oh, sorry," Marcus says, looking around at all the floating chairs and holographic displays. "I was looking for the men's room? This is definitely not the men's room." Vrextaco's compound eyes nearly pop out of his head. "A human? Here? In the sacred chamber?" Quillnoth is already scrolling through his digital clipboard with the enthusiasm of someone who's found a loophole in cosmic law. "Elder, the records show that humans submitted an application for council consideration approximately 37 years ago, but it was filed under pending review due to their species being deemed too primitive." "Perfect," Vrextaco says, and you can practically hear the evil grin in his voice. "Counselor, I believe we have found our next test subject." Marcus, meanwhile, is still trying to process the fact that he's apparently in space court. "Look, I really just need to use the facilities and get back to fixing your air filtration system before someone notices I'm gone." "Nonsense," Vrextaco declares. "You shall undergo the sacred test. Surely a primitive species such as yours will provide adequate amusement when you inevitably fail within the first hour." And that's how Marcus Webb, maintenance worker extraordinaire and accidental diplomatic representative of humanity, found himself being handed 3 of the most adorable, chaotic, and allegedly impossible to manage creatures in the known galaxy. "Great," Marcus mutters, looking down at the carriers containing what sound like a combination of purring, chittering, and what he swears sounds like tiny laughter. "My ex-wife said I was bad with kids. Wait until she hears about this." The moment Marcus opens the first carrier, he understands why 17 different species have failed this test. Out pops what looks like a silver-furred ferret crossed with a small dragon, complete with tiny wings that shimmer like oil slicks. The name tag reads, Nibbles. Nibbles takes one look at Marcus, tilts its head, and promptly phases through the floor. "Ah," Marcus says, staring at the spot where a living creature just violated several laws of physics. "Is that normal?" Elder Vrextaco is already leaning forward in his chair with the eager anticipation of someone watching a car crash in slow motion. "Oh yes, quite normal. Nibbles is our little escape artist. The Thoraxian champion lasted exactly 14 minutes before Nibbles phased into the ventilation system and shut down life support for 3 decks. The second carrier opens to reveal Chaos, a slightly larger cub with fur that shifts colors when it gets excited, which, apparently, is always. Chaos immediately begins investigating Marcus's tool belt by picking up a sonic screwdriver and somehow turning it into what can only be described as a miniature black hole generator. "Hey, whoa there, buddy," Marcus says, gently taking the tool away. "That's not a toy. Well, I mean, technically it's not supposed to be a toy." Chaos looks up at him with huge, disappointed eyes that could melt titanium, then promptly reads Marcus's mind and discovers his memory of his nephew's birthday party. Suddenly, the maintenance bay is filled with holographic balloons and what sounds suspiciously like the melody from Happy birthday. How did it access children's party imagery from your primitive brain? Quillinoth asks, frantically taking notes. Kids are kids. Marcus shrugs, then immediately regrets it, as the third carrier starts shaking violently. Princess emerges like she's making her debut at the Met Gala if the Met Gala were attended by interdimensional beings with serious attitude problems. She's pure white with gold markings, and Marcus swears she's somehow managing to look down on him despite being roughly the size of a guinea pig. Princess takes one telepathic scan of Marcus's thoughts, sniffs disdainfully, and immediately begins redecorating the room by phasing various objects into artistic arrangements that defy both gravity and good taste. She has never approved of any caretaker, Vrextaco explains with obvious satisfaction. The high philosopher of Zentauri spent 2 days trying to achieve mental harmony with her before she drove him to complete nervous breakdown. Marcus watches Princess phase his lunch into the ceiling in what appears to be a statement about human nutritional choices. Yeah, she reminds me of my sister's cat. Same energy, and that's when things get really interesting. Because while the council is busy taking bets on how quickly Marcus will crack, he's already mentally cataloging the cub's behavior patterns with the practiced eye of someone who spent years dealing with malfunctioning equipment and difficult relatives. Right, then, Marcus says, clapping his hands together. Who wants to learn about something called bedtime? The cubs stop their various reality-bending activities and stare at him. In the observation deck, several council members lean forward. In 17 different languages, the same thought occurs to them all. What's a bedtime? Now, if you've ever watched a nature documentary about pack animals, you know there's usually an alpha who establishes dominance through displays of power and intimidation. Marcus's approach is more like a tired dad who just wants everyone to stop screaming long enough for him to drink his coffee. All right, listen up, you three, he says, sitting cross-legged on the floor while the cubs bounce around the room like fuzzy pinballs. I don't know what kind of setup you had before, but we're going to try something new. It's called structure. Nibbles chooses this moment to phase through the wall again, and Marcus can hear Vrextaco chuckling from the observation deck. But here's the thing about humans that the council hasn't figured out yet. They're really, really good at pattern recognition. And Marcus has already noticed that Nibbles only phases when he's looking for attention. So instead of chasing after him, Marcus just continues talking to Chaos and Princess. So, first rule, we eat at regular times. Second rule, we sleep at regular times. Third rule, no phasing through walls without asking permission first. Is a long pause, and then Nibbles slowly phases back through the floor, looking confused. In the observation deck, Quillinoth nearly drops his clipboard. Did he just ignore the escape behavior? Whispers Ambassador Cleeth from the Regelian delegation. Impossible, Vrextaco mutters. Every species attempts to contain the phasing. It's the logical response. Meanwhile, Marcus has discovered that Chaos's color-changing fur follows emotional patterns, and Princess's telekinetic redecorating is actually quite artistic if you can get past the fact that she's hung your lunch from the ceiling. So he does what any reasonable person would do. He works with it instead of against it. Chaos, buddy. I like the light show, but how about we save the rainbow effects for when you're happy instead of when you're destroying my tools? Marcus suggests, gently redirecting the cub away from his equipment. And Princess, that's actually a pretty cool sculpture you made with my wrench and sandwich. But maybe we could use something that's not my lunch next time. The cubs stop and stare at him like he's just spoken in an alien language, which technically he has. See? Here's what nobody told Marcus. For the past 1,000 years, every character who attempted this test treated the cubs like sacred relics that happened to be alive. They approached with reverence, fear, and detailed scientific methodologies designed to preserve the cubs' natural, behavioral patterns. Marcus approaches them like his nephew Tyler after Tyler's had too much sugar at Chuck E. Cheese. Right, so apparently you guys don't have nap time in your culture, Marcus observes, watching Princess try to phase his toolbox into an abstract art installation. But here's the thing about mammals with high energy levels. You need downtime or you get cranky, and cranky kids with reality-bending powers sounds like a problem for everyone. He starts pulling random items from his toolkit. A thermal blanket becomes a fort, a cardboard box that held spare parts becomes, well, a cardboard box, which apparently is the most fascinating object any of the cubs have ever encountered. What is this primitive container? Princess demands telepathically, her mental voice dripping with the disdain of someone encountering public transportation for the first time. It's a box, Marcus says. You get in it, you sit in it, you hide in it, you pretend it's a spaceship. It's the most versatile entertainment device ever invented. All three cubs crowd around the box with the intensity of quantum physicists discovering a new particle. Nibbles phases halfway into it, Chaos turns it 17 different colors, and Princess begins mentally redecorating its interior dimensions. Up in the observation deck, the assembled alien dignitaries are losing their minds. He's given them trash, hisses General Kreksnor of the Mandible Empire. Sacred cubs do not play with refuse, agrees High Priestess Valenda. But Marcus isn't done. Oh, and guys, new rule. When I say no, it means no. Not negotiate, not ignore the human, just no. The cubs freeze. In 1,000 years of sacred reverence, apparently nobody has ever just told them they couldn't do something. Chaos, who's been systematically changing the color of every surface in the room, slowly shifts back to his natural silver. Princess, who is in the middle of rearranging Marcus's molecular structure just to see what would happen, gently sets him back down. And Nibbles, who had been phasing in and out of the walls like a furry strobe light, solidifies completely and sits down. There we go, Marcus says, completely unaware that he's just accomplished something that 17 civilizations couldn't manage. See, you guys are smart. You just needed someone to actually parent you instead of worship you. 3 days into what the Council is now calling the human experiment, something happens that nobody sees coming. Not the betting pool that Quillnoth definitely isn't running, not the xenobiologists frantically taking notes, and certainly not Marcus, who's busy trying to explain why you can't phase through the bathroom door while someone's using it. It starts when Chaos decides to show off his new trick. See, Marcus had been teaching the cubs about Earth games, and Chaos became obsessed with something called tag. The problem with teaching interdimensional beings a game that involves chasing each other is that they don't really understand the concept of boundaries or structural integrity. So there's Chaos, zooming around the habitat at roughly the speed of sound, phasing in and out of solid matter while Princess chases him. And Nibbles provides what can only be described as color commentary by chittering encouragement from inside Marcus's toolbox. Chaos, remember what we talked about, Marcus calls out. Indoor voice, indoor speed, and definitely indoor dimensions. But Chaos is having the time of his life. He rockets toward the ceiling, phases through it, and then makes a critical miscalculation. Instead of phasing back through cleanly, he clips the edge of a support beam in the habitat above. The sound is like someone dropping a piano made of crystal onto concrete. Chaos tumbles back through the ceiling, his color-shifting fur flickering between pain red and fear white, and lands in a heap that makes Marcus's heart stop. Oh no! Oh no! Marcus breathes, dropping to his knees beside the little cub. Chaos isn't moving, and there's a trickle of something that's definitely blood, even if it's silver instead of red. Now here's where things get interesting. Every previous caretaker, when faced with an injured sacred cub, immediately called for the medical team, the priests, the council, and probably their therapists. Marcus does something different. He scoops Chaos up like he's Marcus's own kid, holds him close, and whispers, "Hey buddy, it's okay. You're gonna be fine. I've got you." And Chaos, who's never experienced genuine worry from a caretaker, unconsciously reaches out with his telepathic abilities to comfort the distressed human. Which means he accidentally broadcasts Marcus's emotions to Nibbles and Princess. What they find in Marcus's mind isn't reverence or fear or scientific curiosity. It's the same feeling he had when his nephew Tyler fell off his bike, or when his little sister Emma cried after a nightmare. It's protective, unconditional, and completely uncomplicated by politics or tradition. For the first time in their short lives, the cubs experience what it feels like to be genuinely cared about as individuals, rather than as sacred symbols. Princess immediately phases over to them, pressing against Chaos's side and purring, in harmonics that Marcus can feel in his chest. Nibbles abandons his exploration of the toolbox and curls up next to his brother, adding his own purr to the mix. "Medical team!" Marcus shouts toward the observation deck, but he doesn't let go of Chaos. "And don't give me any of that sacred protocol garbage. This little guy is hurt and he needs help now." In the observation deck, something unprecedented happens. Elder Vrextico actually stands up from his floating chair. "The human," he says slowly, "is exhibiting genuine emotional distress over the cub's welfare." "That's impossible," Quillotnoth protests. "The cubs are not his offspring. There's no biological imperative, no logical reason for such attachment after only 3 days." But the medical team confirms what Marcus already knows. Chaos will be fine. A few stitches, some rest, and he'll be back to turning gravity upside down in no time. More importantly, though, the cubs have learned something that nobody expected. They'd learned empathy. When the medics finish treating Chaos, Princess uses her telekinetic abilities not to redecorate or cause chaos, but to carefully arrange Marcus's scattered tools back into his belt. Nibbles phases through the medical equipment, but only to clean up the area where Chaos was treated. And Chaos, despite being tired and sore, shifts his fur to a warm golden color that Marcus somehow understands means, "Thank you." "Elder," one of the xenobiologists whispers over the comm. The cubs are exhibiting cooperative behavior, voluntary assistance, gratitude expressions. This is unprecedented. Rextaco doesn't respond. He's too busy watching Marcus tuck the cubs into makeshift beds he's fashioned from thermal blankets, humming something that sounds suspiciously like a lullaby. Tomorrow, Marcus tells them quietly, we're going to practice being more careful when we play. But right now, we rest. And for the first time in recorded history, the sacred Zephyrin cubs settled down to sleep without causing a single interdimensional incident. The observation deck, 17 different species representatives sit in stunned silence, watching their monitors display something that shouldn't be possible. 3 of the most chaotic creatures in the known galaxy, sleeping peacefully, because a human janitor told them it was bedtime. The emergency session convenes at what Marcus would call an ungodly hour, except he's not really sure what constitutes godly when you're dealing with 17 different species who all have different concepts of divinity. What he does know is that he's been yanked out of bed by very excited aliens who keep asking him to explain something called the human methodology. I don't have a methodology, Marcus protests for the 15th time, standing in front of what appears to be the galactic equivalent of the United Nations, except everyone's got tentacles, or compound eyes, or both. I just treated them like kids. Elder Vrextaco is pacing now, which is unsettling when you consider that his species evolved from ambush predators. Counselor Quillnoth, replay the footage from Day 4, timestamp 1432. The holographic display shows yesterday's incident. Princess had decided to redecorate the habitat by phasing all the furniture into impossible geometric arrangements. Instead of calling security or consulting the sacred texts of proper cub management, Marcus had simply said, Princess honey, that's very creative, but chairs work better when they exist in the same dimension as the people sitting on them. And Princess, after a moment of what can only be described as interdimensional pouting, had actually put everything back. Impossible, breathes Admiral Thrakvar of the Siege Fleet. The High Command's finest tacticians spent weeks developing strategies to manage the cubs' reality manipulation abilities. Did you try asking them nicely? Marcus asks, which causes several species representatives to start frantically taking notes. But it gets better. Or worse, depending on your perspective. Because while the Council has been having their emergency session, the cubs have been demonstrating their new behaviors to the horrified delight of the station's staff. Nibbles, instead of phasing randomly through the walls and causing structural alerts, has been systematically checking on all the other inhabitants of the station. Not to cause chaos, but because Marcus taught him that it's polite to make sure everyone's okay. The maintenance chief of engineering is currently having what appears to be a breakdown because a sacred interdimensional being just fixed 3 broken air filters and organized his tool storage. Chaos has discovered that his color-changing abilities can be used for communication, and he's been having lengthy conversations with the translation AI, teaching it new emotional spectrums that are apparently revolutionizing xenolinguistics. Dr. Fexilo from the Department of Interspecies Communication is practically hyperventilating over the implications, and Princess, bless her dramatic little heart, has been using her telekinetic abilities to help the custodial staff organize the supply closets. She's approached it like interior decorating, which means everything is now arranged by aesthetic harmony rather than logical categories, but somehow it's more efficient than before. How? Demands High Counselor Zephyra, who looks like an elegant swan crossed with a filing cabinet. Did you accomplish in 1 week what our finest minds couldn't achieve in millennia? Marcus looks around the chamber at all these incredibly advanced beings hanging on his every word, and he's pretty sure he's having some kind of cosmic fever dream. Look, I'm just a maintenance guy. I fix things that are broken. The cubs weren't broken, they were just bored and ignored. Elaborate, Vextaco commands, which sounds a lot less intimidating now that Marcus has seen him frantically taking notes on naptime schedules. You guys treated them like they were supposed to be perfect already, Marcus explains. But they're kids. They're supposed to mess up and learn from it. They're supposed to test boundaries and figure out how the world works. You just never gave them any boundaries to test. Quillnoth raises a flipper. But the sacred texts clearly state that the cubs must be allowed complete freedom to express their natural abilities. Yeah, well, the sacred texts apparently never dealt with toddlers, Marcus replies. You want to know the secret? It's not about controlling them. It's about teaching them to control themselves. And that's when Ambassador Cleeth asks the question that changes everything. Would humanity be willing to provide child care consultation services to the Galactic Council? The chamber goes dead silent. Marcus blinks slowly, processing the fact that he's apparently just been offered a job he didn't apply for, representing a species that doesn't even know this conversation is happening, based on his ability to get interdimensional ferrets to take naps. Are you asking me to become the galaxy's babysitter? he asks. We prefer the title, Director of Juvenile Development and Cross-Species Behavioral Management, Quillnoth says quickly, already drafting what appears to be a contract. With full diplomatic immunity, a Class 7 habitat, and salary commensurate with saving the sanity of 17 civilizations. Marcus looks through the observation window at the cubs, who are currently cooperating to build what appears to be a blanket fort that exists in at least 4 dimensions simultaneously. Nibbles waves at him through the transparent aluminum. Chaos flickers a happy yellow-green, and Princess gives him what he's learned is her version of a smile. Do I get dental? Marcus asks. The council members look at each other in confusion. Never mind, Marcus sighs. Where do I sign? 6 months later, Marcus Webb is standing in front of what can only be described as the galaxy's most ridiculous classroom. He's got a whiteboard that cost more than most planets' GDP, holographic projectors that can simulate entire ecosystems, and an audience of the most powerful beings in known space, all frantically taking notes on his lecture about juice boxes and timeout corners. Now, as you can see from this demonstration, Marcus says, gesturing to where Nibbles is politely asking permission before phasing through a practice wall. The key is consistency. You can't let them phase through walls during tantrums and then expect them not to phase through walls when they're happy. Fleet Admiral Gorthak, whose species conquered 14 star systems through pure military might, raises a tentacle. But what if the juvenile uses their reality manipulation abilities to express dissatisfaction with our guidance? Marcus stares at him for a long moment. You mean, what if they throw a fit? Yes, a fit, Gorthak says solemnly, like he's discussing military strategy. Then you wait it out, Marcus replies. You don't give in. You don't negotiate with terrorists, even if the terrorists are cute and have interdimensional powers. In the practice area, Princess has organized a tea party where all the participants exist in slightly different temporal phases, which is apparently her way of showing off. She's invited Chaos, Nibbles, and 3 very confused council observers, who are now experiencing time at 17% normal speed. Princess, Marcus calls out. What did we say about involving unwilling participants in your reality experiments? Princess's mental voice comes across the telepathic link with the perfect tone of a teenager who's been caught texting in class. That it's rude and I should ask permission first. That's right. So what do you need to do? The princess sighs dramatically, which somehow involves shifting the local gravitational field and returns the observers to normal temporal flow. Sorry, she telepaths to them with the sincerity of someone who's actually learned what apologies mean. The observers stagger away, looking like they've just experienced enlightenment and motion sickness simultaneously. How, demands High Scientist Vexandra, do you maintain authority over beings with capabilities that exceed your own by several orders of magnitude? Marcus considers this while watching Chaos carefully stack blocks in normal 3-dimensional space, instead of his usual approach of building in 17 dimensions at once. Same way you maintain authority over anyone. You be consistent, you be fair, and you actually care about their well-being more than you care about being right. But the power differential, starts diplomatic corps leader Yit Holan. Doesn't matter, Marcus interrupts. A 2-year-old human can't phase through walls or read minds, but they can still make your life miserable if you don't set boundaries. Power isn't the issue, respect is. And that's when Vrextako, who's been silently observing from his floating chair for the entire demonstration, finally speaks up. Marcus Webb of Earth, he says formally, and suddenly the whole room goes quiet. On behalf of the Galactic Council, I hereby extend an official invitation for humanity to join as our newest member species, with full voting rights and representation. Marcus blinks. Because I taught some interdimensional ferrets to use their inside voices? Because, Vregstako replies, and for the first time since Marcus met him, the elder's voice contains something that might actually be respect. Your species possesses something we have lost in our pursuit of advancement. You understand that intelligence without wisdom is merely sophisticated chaos. Quillnoth waddles forward with a tablet the size of a small car. The benefits package includes full medical coverage for your entire species, access to galactic transportation networks, and a retirement plan that spans multiple dimensions. Marcus looks down at the Cubs, who are now cooperatively building what appears to be a scale model of the solar system, with each planet existing in perfect orbital harmony. Nibbles has even figured out how to make tiny asteroid belts that actually rotate. And I get to keep training people how to deal with difficult kids? We prefer advanced beings with complex behavioral patterns? Quillnoth corrects. Right, Marcus grins. Difficult kids. He signs the treaty with a pen that costs more than his annual salary, officially making humanity the galaxy's first species to join the Council through superior babysitting skills. The final twist comes when Marcus gets a video call from Earth later that day. His sister Emma appears on the holographic display, bouncing her 6-month-old son on her knee. "Marcus, how's the new job going? Mom said you're working on some kind of space station now?" Marcus glances around his new office, which overlooks a training facility where the Siege Fleet's finest warriors are currently learning the proper way to implement timeout procedures for species with quantum tunneling abilities. "Yeah," he says, watching Nibbles phase through the wall to deliver juice boxes to the trainees. "It's going pretty well. Turns out all those years watching Tyler and the twins prepared me for more than I thought." And grins. Who would have guessed that surviving family reunions was actually job training for intergalactic diplomacy? Marcus laughs, and in the background he can hear Princess giving a lecture to a group of philosophical advisors about the importance of sharing toys, even if those toys happen to be pocket dimensions. "Yeah," he says, watching the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy learn basic parenting from interdimensional space ferrets. Who would have guessed? The best part? The Cubs graduated from their sacred test phase last month. Now they're Marcus's teaching assistants, helping him train the next generation of galactic leaders in the fine art of not losing your mind when someone small and powerful decides to reorganize reality according to their personal aesthetic preferences. Turns out the galaxy didn't need better warriors or smarter scientists or more enlightened philosophers. They just needed someone who understood that sometimes the most advanced beings in the universe still need to be told to clean up their toys and get a good night's sleep.